Ethan paced his office, his sharp mind racing through possibilities. The leak had to be someone with access to high-level information, someone he had trusted. It was a betrayal that cut deeply, and he hated how much it mirrored Damien's ability to exploit personal vulnerabilities. Sophie sat at the desk across from him, her eyes scanning spreadsheets and correspondence records. She had taken it upon herself to comb through every detail, determined to find the traitor. "What about Ryan from procurement?" she asked, glancing up at Ethan. "He's been with the company for years," Ethan replied. "But that doesn't mean he's innocent." Sophie nodded, jotting down his name on the growing list of suspects. "We should cross-check his communications with Damien's timeline." Ethan stopped pacing and looked at her. "You've been at this for hours. Take a break." Sophie shook her head. "Not until we have something concrete. This affects both of us now, Ethan. I'm not going to let him win." Ethan's chest tightened at the determination in her voice. He stepped closer, his voice softer. "I don't deserve you, you know." Sophie looked up, startled by the rare vulnerability in his tone. "That's not true. You've built this company from the ground up, Ethan. You deserve loyalty. We'll find out who's behind this." The intensity in his gaze made her heart race. "It's not just about the company. Sophie, you've changed the way I see everything, including myself." Sophie swallowed hard, their closeness sending her mind into overdrive. But before she could respond, the intercom buzzed. As Ethan and Sophie navigated their investigation, the rest of the office couldn't help but notice the shift between them. "I swear, there's something going on with Mr. Blackwell and Sophie," whispered Mia, one of the junior assistants, as she passed the break room. "Impossible," another staff member replied. "Mr. Blackwell doesn't date. Especially not someone who works for him." But the lingering glances, the late nights spent together, and the subtle yet undeniable chemistry between Ethan and Sophie hadn't gone unnoticed. 2 days later, Sophie burst into Ethan's office, her eyes alight with discovery. "I found something," she said, closing the door behind her. Ethan stood from his desk, instantly alert. "What is it?" Sophie held up a printout. "Ryan from procurement. He's been making unusually large withdrawals from his personal account, right around the time our supplier information was leaked. And look at this." She handed him another sheet. Emails between Ryan and a Damien Cross associate. "I found them buried in the system." Ethan's jaw tightened as he scanned the documents. "That traitor." "It gets worse," Sophie said, her tone grim. "He's scheduled to meet with Damien tonight. I found an encrypted calendar entry on his account." Ethan's eyes narrowed. "Where?" "A restaurant downtown," Sophie replied. "If we catch him in the act, we'll have undeniable proof." That evening, Ethan and Sophie arrived at the upscale restaurant, their presence drawing more than a few curious glances. They spotted Ryan at a corner table, speaking with a man Sophie recognized from the company's security briefings as one of Damien's key operatives. "Let me handle this," Ethan said, his tone icy as he adjusted his tie and strode toward the table. Sophie followed, her heart pounding. Ryan looked up, his face draining of color when he saw Ethan. "Mr. Blackwell?" "Save it," Ethan interrupted, his voice cold. "I trusted you, Ryan. And you sold me out to Damien Cross." Ryan stammered, but before he could respond, Ethan slammed the incriminating documents onto the table. "Care to explain these?" The man with Ryan stood, his expression guarded. "This is a private conversation." Ethan turned his sharp gaze on him. "Not anymore. You have 30 seconds to leave before I call security." The man hesitated but eventually left, muttering under his breath. Sophie stepped closer, her voice calm but firm. "Ryan, we know everything. The emails, the withdrawals, the meetings. You're done." Ryan sagged in his chair, his composure crumbling. It wasn't supposed to go this far, he muttered. Damien promised it would just be small things, nothing that would hurt the company. Small things? Ethan's voice was a dangerous growl. You've jeopardized everything I've built. I'm sorry, Ryan whispered, his face pale. I needed the money. My wife. She's sick. Ethan hesitated, the anger in his eyes briefly replaced by something softer. Sophie placed a hand on his arm, grounding him. We'll deal with this the right way, she said quietly. Ethan nodded, though his jaw remained tight. You're fired, Ryan. Effective immediately. And don't think for a second I won't involve the authorities if Damien tries to use anything you've given him. Back in the car, Ethan was uncharacteristically quiet. Sophie glanced at him, her hand brushing his as she reached for the gear shift. You did the right thing, she said softly. Ethan exhaled, his shoulders relaxing slightly. I hate this, having to question everyone around me. Sophie gave his hand a gentle squeeze. You don't have to question me. He turned to her, his expression unreadable. I know, and that's the only thing keeping me sane right now. The quiet confession hung between them, the closeness they had been trying to manage is now undeniable. As the city lights blurred past, Ethan reached for her hand, holding it tightly as they drove into the unknown. Ethan and Sophie spent the next morning strategizing in his office. With Ryan's betrayal exposed, they had valuable leverage against Damien. Ethan's sharp mind was fully focused on the next steps, but the occasional brush of Sophie's hand against his or the way their eyes met lingered in the back of his thoughts, distracting him more than he cared to admit. We need to hit Damien where it hurts, Sophie said, standing by the whiteboard they had filled with diagrams of connections, deals, and potential weak points in Damien's network. Ethan smirked from his chair. And you have an idea, don't you? Sophie grinned, her confidence growing in his presence. Of course. If Damien thrives on destabilizing your business relationships, we do the opposite, we stabilize them. We call an emergency summit with all the major suppliers and clients, assure them of Blackwell Enterprises' strength, and offer them incentives to stay loyal. Ethan leaned back, his arms crossed as he admired her initiative. And the leak? Announce it publicly, Sophie replied. Frame it as a minor setback that you handled swiftly. Transparency will kill any rumors Damien tries to spread. Ethan's smirk turned into a genuine smile. You should run this company instead of me. Sophie rolled her eyes, though her cheeks flushed at the compliment. Not a chance. You'd be lost without me. Ethan stood, closing the distance between them. You're not wrong. Their gazes locked for a moment too long, the unspoken tension between them resurfacing. Sophie cleared her throat and turned back to the whiteboard. So, the summit. I can start reaching out to everyone this afternoon. Ethan nodded, his expression unreadable. Do it. The sooner, the better. 2 days later, Blackwell Enterprises hosted its first ever loyalty summit. The top floor of the company's headquarters had been transformed into a sleek conference space, with panoramic views of the city providing a stunning backdrop. Ethan, dressed in his signature tailored suit, opened the summit with a commanding speech. He acknowledged the challenges they'd faced, subtly referencing Damien's meddling, and promised a stronger, more unified future for the company. Sophie watched from the sidelines, her chest swelling with pride. The man she had come to know wasn't just a ruthless businessman, he was a leader who genuinely cared about the people who relied on him. As the summit progressed, Ethan moved from table to table, engaging with suppliers and clients, while Sophie worked behind the scenes to ensure everything ran smoothly. But it wasn't long before Damien made his move. Halfway through the event, Sophie received a message from security. Damien Cross himself had shown up uninvited. She found Ethan near the bar, speaking with a supplier. We've got a problem, she whispered, leaning close to his ear. Ethan's expression darkened. Of course he would show up now. I can handle it, Sophie offered, her voice calm but firm. Ethan shook his head. No. Let's handle it together. Damien stood in the lobby, a smug smile on his face as Ethan and Sophie approached. Ethan, Damien drawled. I couldn't resist stopping by. Looks like quite the event. You're not welcome here, Ethan said coldly. Damien chuckled, his confidence unshaken. Come now, is that any way to treat an old friend? Friend? Ethan's voice was laced with contempt. You've been trying to destroy everything I've built. Damien's smile faltered for a brief moment, but he quickly recovered. Business is business. Ethan. You know that better than anyone. Sophie stepped forward, her eyes narrowing. Is that why you paid off Ryan to sabotage this company? Because you were too afraid to compete fairly? Damien's eyes flicked to Sophie, his amusement replaced by irritation. Ah, the secretary. Always meddling where she doesn't belong. Ethan bristled, stepping protectively in front of Sophie. Watch your mouth, Damien. The tension between the two men crackled like electricity, but before things could escalate, Sophie spoke again, her voice calm and measured. You should leave, Mr. Cross. Everyone here knows the truth about what you've done. Whatever leverage you thought you had is gone. Damien's jaw tightened, but he forced a smirk. This isn't over. Actually, it is. Ethan said, his voice steady. Security will escort you out now. Damien glared at them both before turning on his heel and walking out. His defeat palpable. The summit was a resounding success. Clients and suppliers left reassured, and the public statement about Ryan's betrayal had diffused any potential scandals. Later that evening, as the team celebrated in the office, Ethan found Sophie alone on the balcony, looking out at the city lights. Care for some company? He asked, stepping beside her. She smiled softly. Always. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment before Ethan spoke again. I couldn't have done this without you. You could have, Sophie replied, her voice light. But it wouldn't have been as fun. Ethan chuckled, then turned to face her. Sophie, I meant what I said earlier. You're more than just my secretary. You're my partner. And I don't mean just in business. Her breath hitched as she looked up at him, his expression earnest. Ethan. I'm not good at this, he admitted, his voice rough. But I know I feel something for you that I've never felt for anyone else. Sophie's heart raced, her defenses crumbling. I feel the same way. Ethan reached for her hand, his touch, warm and steady. Then let's figure this out. Together. For the first time in years, Ethan felt hope, not just for his business, but for something far more personal. The morning after their heartfelt confession, Sophie arrived at the office with a mix of excitement and nerves. She and Ethan hadn't defined what they were yet, but the weight of their unspoken feelings was gone, replaced by something warm and thrilling. Morning, Sophie, Ethan greeted her as she stepped into his office. His voice was casual, but the slight curve of his lips hinted at the new layer of intimacy between them. Good morning, Mr. Blackwell, Sophie replied with a teasing smile. Ethan raised an eyebrow. Mr. Blackwell? I think we're past that now. Sophie laughed softly, placing a folder on his desk. Force of habit. But speaking of work, here's the updated client retention report. Everything from the summit is looking promising. Ethan flipped through the pages, nodding in approval. You've outdone yourself again. You say that like you're surprised, Sophie quipped. Ethan smirked. Never. As the days passed, their relationship settled into a rhythm. During work hours, Sophie was the consummate professional, keeping Ethan's chaotic schedule in check and managing the fallout from Damien's schemes. After hours, though, they let their guard down, sharing dinners, late-night conversations, and stolen moments that made the long days worthwhile. But balancing their personal and professional lives wasn't without its challenges. At the weekly executive meeting, Ethan struggled to focus as Sophie presented the latest marketing strategy. Her poise and confidence were magnetic, and he found himself distracted by the way her eyes lit up when she spoke passionately about her ideas. "Ethan," one of the executives prompted, snapping him back to the discussion. He cleared his throat, masking his lapse in attention. "Yes, the strategy looks solid. Let's proceed as planned." Sophie glanced at him, her expression neutral, but he caught the flicker of amusement in her eyes. Meanwhile, the office buzzed with rumors. "I swear they're dating," Mia whispered to another assistant during lunch. "No way. Sophie's too smart to get involved with the boss," the other replied. But the glances, the subtle touches, and the way Ethan's mood had noticeably improved were hard to ignore. Sophie did her best to ignore the whispers, focusing on her work. But one afternoon, as she was leaving the break room, she overheard two colleagues speculating about her relationship with Ethan. "She's just using him to climb the ladder," one said. Sophie froze, the words cutting deeper than she expected. That evening, Ethan noticed Sophie was quieter than usual as they worked late in his office. "Everything okay?" he asked, setting down his pen. Sophie hesitated, then sighed. "I overheard some comments today. People think I'm using you to get ahead." Ethan's expression darkened. "Who said that?" "It doesn't matter," Sophie replied quickly. I don't want anyone thinking I don't deserve to be here on my own merit." Ethan stood, crossing the room to stand in front of her. "Sophie, you've earned everything you have. Anyone who says otherwise is either blind or jealous." She looked up at him, her eyes searching his. "But what if this, us, makes things harder for you? For the company?" Ethan cupped her face gently, his voice steady. "I don't care what people think. Sophie, you've been by my side through everything, and I trust you more than anyone. Let them talk. We know the truth." Her lips curved into a small smile. "You always know what to say, don't you?" "Only with you," he admitted. The next day, Ethan took a bold step. During a company-wide meeting, he addressed the rumors head-on. "I want to take a moment to acknowledge the incredible work Sophie has done for this company," he began, his tone firm. "Her dedication, intelligence, and leadership have been instrumental in our success. Any suggestion that she's here for any reason other than her merit is not only false but unacceptable." The room fell silent, the weight of his words sinking in. Sophie felt her cheeks flush, but she met Ethan's gaze with quiet gratitude. After the meeting, Mia approached Sophie hesitantly. "I'm sorry for anything I might have said," she mumbled. Sophie smiled warmly. "It's okay, Mia. Let's focus on moving forward." As the weeks passed, Sophie and Ethan grew more confident in navigating their dual roles. They kept their relationship private, sharing moments of connection when the office was quiet and leaning on each other during challenging days. Ethan found himself opening up in ways he never had before, sharing stories of his childhood and dreams for the future. Sophie, in turn, felt her walls coming down, trusting Ethan with her fears and aspirations. One evening, as they sat on Ethan's penthouse balcony overlooking the city, he took her hand in his. "Sophie, I don't know where this is going," he said quietly, "but I know I want you by my side. For all of it." Sophie squeezed his hand, her heart full. "Then that's where I'll be." Together, they faced the unknown, ready to build something lasting in both their personal and professional lives. Ethan stared out the floor-to-ceiling windows of his penthouse, the city lights sprawling beneath him. He had always loved this view, the constant movement and energy mirroring his relentless drive. But tonight, his mind was elsewhere, on Sophie, their growing connection, and the recent news about his sister, Lily. Sophie entered the room with 2 glasses of wine, her smile softening the edges of his worry. "I thought you could use this," she said, handing him a glass. Ethan took it, his fingers brushing hers. "Thank you." She joined him at the window, her gaze following his to the city below. "You've been quiet since the call with Lily's doctor. Want to talk about it?" He sighed, his shoulders heavy with the weight of emotions he rarely let surface. "Lily's condition has stabilized, but the doctors say her recovery will be slow. The treatments are working, but she'll need ongoing care." Sophie reached for his hand, her touch grounding him. "That's good news, Ethan. Stabilized means she's moving in the right direction." He nodded, a hint of relief in his expression. "It is. I just hate not being there for her as much as I should be." Sophie squeezed his hand. "You've done everything you can. You've made sure she has the best care, and you've been her rock through all of this. She knows how much you love her." Ethan looked at her. His eyes filled with gratitude. "How do you always know exactly what to say?" Sophie smiled softly. "Because I care about you. And I know how much you care about her." The balance between their personal and professional lives grew more intricate with each passing day. Ethan and Sophie had settled into a rhythm that worked for them, but the challenges kept coming. At work, Sophie continued to prove her worth as more than just Ethan's assistant. She had taken on additional responsibilities, becoming a trusted advisor to Ethan and an integral part of the company's leadership team. But the lines between their roles often blurred, leading to moments of tension. One afternoon, during a heated discussion about a potential acquisition, Sophie pushed back against Ethan's plan. "I think it's too risky," she said firmly, her tone professional but unwavering. "The numbers don't support this move right now." Ethan frowned, his instinct to defend his decision clashing with his respect for her insight. "We can handle the risk. This deal could give us a foothold in an entirely new market. And if it backfires," Sophie countered, "we'd be overextending ourselves at a time when we're still recovering from Damien's mess." The room fell silent, the tension palpable. Ethan took a deep breath, his expression softening. "You're right. I don't like it, but you're right." Sophie raised an eyebrow, a teasing smile tugging at her lips. "Did I just win an argument with Ethan Blackwell?" He chuckled, the tension breaking. "Don't get used to it." Outside of work, Ethan and Sophie's relationship deepened in ways neither of them had anticipated. One evening, Ethan surprised Sophie with tickets to an art exhibit she had mentioned in passing weeks earlier. "You remembered?" she asked, touched by the gesture. "Of course," he replied, his voice soft. "I remember everything about you, Sophie." At the exhibit, they strolled through the gallery hand in hand, their connection palpable. Ethan found himself opening up about his childhood, sharing stories of how he and Lily had navigated their parents' messy divorce and how those experiences had shaped his guarded nature. "It's hard for me to trust," he admitted as they paused in front of a painting. "But with you, it feels different, easier." Sophie smiled, her heart full. "You're not as hard to read as you think, Ethan. You just needed someone willing to look past the walls." The following weekend, Ethan and Sophie flew out to visit Lily. Lily greeted them with a warm smile, her pale complexion belying the strength in her eyes. "You must be Sophie," she said, her voice kind but curious. "Ethan mentioned you." Sophie blushed, extending her hand. "It's so nice to meet you, Lily. Ethan speaks about you all the time." Lily's gaze flicked between them, her smile growing. "Good things. I hope." "Always," Sophie replied sincerely. During the visit, Sophie's natural warmth and compassion shone. She listened to Lily's stories, helped her with small tasks, and even coaxed a rare laugh from Ethan's sister. As they left the hospital that evening, Ethan turned to Sophie, his expression uncharacteristically vulnerable. "Thank you for being here. For her. For me." "Always," Sophie replied, her voice steady. Back in the city, Ethan and Sophie began discussing the future not just for the company but for themselves. "Do you ever think about where this is going?" Ethan asked one evening as they sat on his couch, a glass of wine in each hand. Sophie looked at him, her eyes searching his. I think about it all the time. But I'm not in a rush. As long as we're honest with each other and keep building what we have, that's enough for me. Ethan smiled, his hand brushing hers. I've never been good at this, relationships. But with you, it feels right. Sophie leaned into him, her voice soft. We'll figure it out. Together. And for the first time in years, Ethan felt truly hopeful, not just for the company's future, but for his own. The boardroom erupted in applause as Ethan concluded the final presentation. The deal, one of the biggest in Blackwell Enterprises history, was officially closed. The partnership would secure the company's future, solidify its dominance in the market, and mark the culmination of months of hard work. Ethan's smile was subtle but genuine as he exchanged handshakes with the executives in the room. His gaze, however, drifted to Sophie, who stood at the back with a quiet, proud smile. She gave him a small thumbs up, and he felt a warmth he couldn't ignore. Congratulations, Mr. Blackwell, one of the board members said, shaking his hand. Thank you, Ethan replied, but his eyes remained on Sophie. That evening, the office was transformed into a celebratory venue, with champagne flowing and laughter filling the air. Ethan rarely attended such events, but this time, he stayed, knowing the moment deserved to be shared. Sophie stood near the bar, chatting with a few colleagues, her laughter like music to Ethan's ears. He made his way toward her, holding 2 glasses of champagne. To us, he said, handing her a glass. To the company, you mean, Sophie teased, her eyes sparkling. Ethan smirked. To both. They clinked glasses, the moment lingering as their gazes locked. As the celebration wound down, Ethan and Sophie stepped onto the rooftop terrace for some fresh air. The city skyline sparkled like a sea of stars, and the cool breeze carried a sense of promise. Ethan's phone buzzed, and he frowned at the screen. It's Lily's doctor, he said, answering quickly. Sophie watched as his expression shifted from tense to relieved, and then to something resembling joy. Thank you, doctor, Ethan said, his voice thick with emotion. He ended the call and turned to Sophie, his eyes bright. Lily's scans came back clear. The treatments worked. She's in remission. Sophie's hand flew to her mouth, tears springing to her eyes. Ethan, that's incredible. He pulled her into an embrace, holding her tightly as the weight of months of worry lifted. I can't believe it, he murmured. Sophie pulled back just enough to look at him. She's going to be okay. And you, your family, deserve this happiness. As the night deepened, Ethan led Sophie back to his penthouse, where the city lights framed the windows. They sat together on the couch, the champagne forgotten as they soaked in the moment. Sophie, Ethan began, his voice steady but filled with emotion. I never thought I'd have any of this. The company thriving, Lily is healthy, and you. She reached for his hand, her touch warm and reassuring. You deserve it, Ethan. All of it. He took a deep breath, his usual confidence replaced with vulnerability. I've spent so much of my life building walls, but you broke through them. You showed me that trust isn't a weakness and that love doesn't make you vulnerable, it makes you stronger. Sophie's heart raced as she listened, her eyes never leaving his. I love you, Ethan said simply, the words carrying the weight of his transformation. Sophie's eyes filled with tears as she smiled. I love you too. Ethan cupped her face, his lips capturing hers in a kiss that spoke of every emotion he'd held back for so long. It was tender and passionate, a promise of the life they would build together. Weeks later, Lily joined Ethan and Sophie for a quiet dinner at his penthouse. Her strength was returning, and her laughter filled the room as they shared stories and plans for the future. So, Sophie, Lily said with a mischievous smile. When's the wedding? Sophie choked on her sip of wine, her cheeks flushing. Lily. Ethan chuckled, wrapping an arm around Sophie. Sooner than you think. Sophie turned to him, her surprise melting into a smile. Oh, really? Ethan nodded, his eyes filled with certainty. I know what I want, Sophie. And it's you. Always. Sophie leaned into him, her heart full. Then let's make it happen. As the evening continued, the three of them laughed and planned, their lives intertwined by love, resilience, and the promise of a future brighter than any of them had imagined. Months later, Ethan and Sophie exchanged vows in an intimate ceremony surrounded by family and close friends. Lily stood by Ethan's side as his best woman, her health fully restored and her smile radiant. As Ethan and Sophie danced under the stars, the world around them seemed to fade away. They had faced challenges, overcome fears, and found love in the unlikeliest of places. In each other, they had found not just a partner, but a home. And as the music played and their laughter echoed into the night, they knew this was only the beginning of a lifetime of happiness together.